The morning sun streaming through the stained glass windows of St. Mary's Church painted rainbow patterns across the marble floor. Andrew Jones stood at the altar in his charcoal gray suit, his hands steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. At 42, he'd finally found the woman he wanted to spend his life with, or so he thought. 180 guests filled the oak pews, their whispered conversations creating a gentle hum that reminded Andrew of summer bees among his mother's sunflowers back at Willowbrook Farm. He caught himself searching for his mother's face in the front row, finding comfort in her presence as he always had. Dorothy Jones sat with her hands folded in her lap, wearing the simple blue dress they'd picked out together at Miller's department store last month. At 67, she still carried herself with the quiet dignity that came from 4 decades of working the land, of building something real with her own 2 hands. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and though her face showed the weathered lines of a life spent outdoors, her hazel eyes were bright and alert. Andrew's mind drifted back 3 years to the engineering conference in Chicago, where he'd first met Melissa Bradford. She'd been presenting on digital marketing strategies for tech companies, and he'd been captivated not just by her intelligence, but by her confidence, her poise, the way she commanded a room full of executives twice her age. When she'd approached him at the networking reception, champagne glass in hand and a dazzling smile on her lips, he'd felt like the luckiest man alive. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of upscale restaurants and weekend getaways, art gallery openings and charity galas, a world so far removed from Willowbrook Farm that sometimes Andrew felt like he was living 2 separate lives. Melissa was the director of marketing at a prominent tech startup, ambitious and driven, always networking, always climbing. She represented everything his simple life in Riverside wasn't: sophisticated, cosmopolitan, connected. The Bradford family occupied the left side of the church like visiting royalty. Richard Bradford, Melissa's father, sat ramrod straight in his custom-tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. As the president of Riverside National Bank, he carried an air of authority that made even the wealthiest locals defer to him. Beside him, Jennifer Bradford dripped in jewelry, a diamond necklace that probably cost more than Dorothy made in a year, selling vegetables and eggs at the Saturday farmers market, matching earrings that caught the light with every slight movement of her head. Andrew had tried to bridge the gap between his 2 worlds, but the Bradfords had made their opinions clear from the beginning. They tolerated his background, but didn't embrace it. Dorothy was treated with polite distance, like a relic from a world they'd long since left behind. The organ music swelled, and the congregation rose as one. Andrew's breath caught as Melissa appeared at the back of the church. Her wedding dress, $8,000 of ivory silk and delicate lace, seemed to glow in the morning light. Her auburn hair was styled in an elegant updo by a stylist flown in from New York, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like she'd stepped out of a bridal magazine, every detail orchestrated to perfection. As she glided down the aisle on her father's arm, Andrew felt his heart swell. This was it. This was the moment he'd been dreaming about for months. His sister Elizabeth had apologized profusely for missing the ceremony. A medical emergency at the hospital where she worked as a trauma surgeon had required her expertise. But his mother was here, and that was what mattered most. The ceremony proceeded with traditional grace. Pastor Williams spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together through joy and hardship. When it came time for the vows, Andrew spoke from his heart, his voice steady and clear as he promised to honor and cherish Melissa for all his days. Melissa's vows were equally beautiful, perfectly delivered with just the right amount of emotion glistening in her eyes. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Andrew leaned in for the kiss that would seal their union. For one perfect moment, with Melissa's lips on his and the guests applauding, everything felt exactly right. If only that moment could have lasted. The receiving line formed quickly, guests eager to congratulate the newlyweds and move on to the reception at the Riverside Country Club. Andrew shook hands and accepted hugs, watching Melissa work the crowd with practiced ease. She knew exactly what to say to everyone, complimenting the women on their outfits, charming the men with her wit, playing the role of perfect bride with effortless grace. Dorothy waited near the back of the line, as she always did. Andrew had noticed over the years how his mother made herself small around Melissa's crowd, never pushing forward, always deferring to others. It broke his heart a little. this woman who had raised him and his sister single-handedly after their father died, who had kept the farm running through droughts and floods, who had sacrificed everything to put both her children through college, now standing timidly behind strangers, waiting her turn to congratulate her own son. When the crowd finally thinned, Dorothy approached with that shy smile Andrew knew so well. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out to embrace him first. "Congratulations, sweetheart," she whispered, her arms wrapping around him in a hug that smelled of lavender soap and something earthier, the honest scent of soil and growing things that no amount of scrubbing could completely eliminate. It was the smell of home, of Saturday mornings helping her in the garden, of Sunday dinners around the old oak table. Dorothy released Andrew and turned to Melissa, her arms opening for what should have been a simple, heartfelt embrace between two women who both loved the same man. Instead, Melissa took a sharp step backward, her nose wrinkling as if she'd encountered something foul. "Oh God, no," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. "She reeks of dirt and animal waste." The words hit the air like a slap. Conversations around them stuttered and died. Andrew felt his mother's body go rigid beside him, her arms dropping to her sides. Melissa continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "Andrew, your mother should have cleaned up properly before coming. This is a society wedding, not a county fair." A few of Melissa's sorority sisters giggled nervously. Jennifer Bradford covered her mouth, her eyes sparkling with barely suppressed amusement. Richard Bradford shook his head but said nothing, as if this was simply an unfortunate social mishap rather than a devastating insult. Andrew stood frozen, watching the color drain from his mother's face. Dorothy didn't cry, didn't protest, didn't defend herself. She never did when people hurt her. She simply stood there, her dignity intact even as her heart visibly shattered, and that somehow made it worse. "Melissa," Andrew said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Apologize to my mother, right now." Melissa looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Oh, come on, Andrew, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." She turned to her maid of honor, rolling her eyes. "Can you believe this?" "Melissa," Andrew's voice was steel now. "Apologize." "I will not," she said, her tone shifting from playful to defensive. "Everyone's thinking it. I just said what was obvious. Your mother should have made more of an effort for our special day." The church was completely silent now. 180 people held their breath, sensing that something fundamental was breaking. Andrew looked at his mother, this woman who had worked 18-hour days to keep him fed and clothed, who had gone without so he could have new shoes for school, who had never missed a single one of his soccer games, even when she was exhausted from the harvest. He looked at Melissa, the woman he'd thought he loved, who was smiling smugly as if she'd won some small victory. The choice wasn't difficult at all. "Take off the ring," Andrew said quietly. Melissa's smile faltered. "What?" "The wedding ring. Take it off. This marriage is over." The silence insane. Mary's church was so complete that Andrew could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Melissa's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then anger in rapid succession. "Andrew, don't be ridiculous," she hissed, her perfect composure cracking. "You're overreacting to a harmless comment." "Harmless?" Andrew's voice rose, and he didn't care that every eye in the church was on them. "You publicly humiliated my mother at our wedding. You called her disgusting in front of 180 people. There is nothing harmless about that." Richard Bradford stepped forward, his banker's smile fixed in place. "Son, let's all take a breath here. Weddings are stressful, emotions run high." "Mr. Bradford," Andrew cut him off, "with all due respect, this doesn't concern you." He turned back to Melissa. "I'm not asking again. Ring off, now." Melissa's eyes flashed with something ugly. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life. Everyone here will know you're the one who chose his mother over a woman who treats people like garbage?" Andrew removed his own wedding band and placed it on the altar beside the Bible. "Yeah, they will, and I'm fine with that." He gently took his mother's elbow. Dorothy was trembling now, whether from shock or suppressed emotion, he couldn't tell. As they walked toward the church doors, Melissa's voice rang out behind them. "You'll regret this, Andrew Jones. Do you know what you're throwing away? Do you have any idea?" Andrew didn't turn around. He simply kept walking, his hand steady on his mother's arm, through the massive oak doors and into the bright June sunlight. The drive back to Willowbrook Farm passed in heavy silence. Dorothy sat in the passenger seat of Andrew's pickup truck, staring out at the rolling countryside of eastern Pennsylvania. Her hands were folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles showed white against her weathered skin. "Mom," Andrew began, but she held up one hand. "Please, sweetheart, not yet. I need a moment." Andrew focused on the road, his mind replaying the last 3 years in a new and uncomfortable light. How many little comments had Melissa made about his mother that he'd brushed off? "Your mother's clothes are so quaint. Does she ever go to a real salon? I hope our children won't pick up that country accent." He'd told himself Melissa just needed time to adjust to his background, that she'd come to appreciate Dorothy's quiet strength and genuine warmth. But those small cruelties had never been about adjustment. They'd been about who Melissa truly was, someone who measured a person's worth by their social standing and bank account rather than their character. Willowbrook Farm appeared as they crested the final hill, and Andrew felt something loosen in his chest. The white clapboard farmhouse with its wraparound porch, the big red barn with its weathered wood siding, the fields stretching toward the horizon in neat rows of green. This was real. This was home. Andrew parked in the gravel driveway, the familiar crunch of stones under his tires somehow comforting. He turned off the engine and sat for a moment, trying to find the right words. "Andrew," Dorothy said softly, finally turning to look at him. Her eyes were wet, but no tears had fallen. "You didn't have to do that. I'm fine. I've dealt with worse." "That's exactly the problem, Mom," Andrew said, his voice thick. "You shouldn't have to deal with it at all. And the fact that you said you're fine, you're not fine. What she did was cruel and unforgivable." "But you loved her." "I thought I did," Andrew admitted. "But I don't think I really knew her. The woman I thought I loved wouldn't have treated you that way, wouldn't have treated anyone that way." Dorothy reached over and squeezed his hand. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." "Mom, you have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing." Andrew squeezed back. "Come on, let's get inside." As they walked toward the house, Andrew's phone began to buzz in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw the notifications piling up. Missed calls, text messages, voicemails. Most were from Melissa, progressing from apologetic to desperate to angry in the space of 20 minutes. "Charles, please come back, we can fix this." "You're embarrassing me in front of everyone, this is so childish." "Fine, ruin your life over nothing, see if I care." There were also several voicemails. Andrew hit play on the first one, from Richard Bradford. "Andrew, this is Richard. Look, I understand you're upset, but you need to think rationally about this. Melissa is emotional right now, but she'll calm down. You two have a future together, and we've invested a great deal in this relationship. Your mother is a sweet woman, I'm sure, but you can't throw away your entire future over one misunderstanding. Call me. We need to discuss this like adults." Invested. Like Andrew and Melissa's relationship was a portfolio to be managed. He was about to delete the rest when a message from an unknown number caught his attention. "Andrew, this is Kate Morrison. We went to law school together. I'm not sure if you remember me. I'm Jennifer Bradford's estate attorney. I need to speak with you urgently. It's about Melissa. Please, call me as soon as you can. This is important." Andrew stared at the message, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. Kate Morrison. He did remember her. Brilliant, ethical, the top of their class. What would Jennifer Bradford's lawyer need to tell him that was so urgent? Inside the farmhouse, Dorothy had gone straight to the kitchen, doing what she always did when upset, cooking. Andrew could hear pots and pans clattering, the familiar sounds of his mother working through her emotions the only way she knew how. He stepped out onto the back porch and dialed Kate's number. Kate Morrison answered on the second ring. "Andrew? Thank God. Can you talk?" "I can talk. What's this about?" "First, are you somewhere private? Is your mother with you?" Andrew's unease deepened. "She's in the kitchen. I'm alone." "Kate, what's going on?" There was a pause, and Andrew could hear papers rustling on the other end of the line. When Kate spoke again, her voice was careful, precise, her lawyer voice. "Andrew, I need to tell you something, but I need you to understand that what I'm about to share potentially violates attorney-client privilege. I'm doing this anyway because I believe my client's daughter is engaged in criminal activity, and I have an ethical obligation to prevent harm." Criminal activity. Kate, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. Andrew, 3 months ago, Melissa hired a private investigator to research your family, specifically your mother and Willowbrook Farm. Andrew's hand tightened on the phone. She what? I found the invoice in Jennifer's files. Melissa had her mother pay for it using the estate account. The report is 50 pages long, detailing every aspect of your mother's life. Property records, financial history, medical information they could obtain legally, everything. Why would she? That's not the worst part. Kate's voice was grim. Andrew, I need to ask you something. Did your mother recently inherit anything? Any property or money? Andrew's mind went blank for a moment, then clicked into focus. Uncle Thomas, Mom's uncle, he died about 6 weeks ago. Thomas Hartwell? Yes, he had a farm adjoining ours. Mom was his only living relative. Andrew's voice dropped. Kate, how much do you know? I know that Thomas Hartwell's estate was valued at approximately $8.5 million, including 2,500 acres of prime agricultural land. I know because I helped file the probate documents last month. Kate paused. Andrew, did Melissa know about this inheritance? No, Mom didn't even tell me until last week, and I haven't told anyone else. Uncle Thomas specifically requested in his will that Mom wait 90 days before making any announcements. He wanted to see who... Andrew's voice trailed off as understanding crashed over him. He wanted to see who would stick around when they thought there was nothing to gain. Smart man, Kate said softly. Andrew, the private investigator's report is dated 3 months ago. It doesn't mention any inheritance because it wasn't public yet, which means Melissa has been planning something based on incomplete information. Planning what? That's where it gets worse. 6 weeks ago, Melissa met with Daniel Foster, an attorney who specializes in conservatorship cases. Conservatorship? That's for people who can't manage their own affairs due to mental incompetence, Kate finished. Yes, I saw the email Melissa sent to Foster. I shouldn't have access to it, but we work in the same firm and there was a server issue last week that... She sighed. Look, the technical details don't matter. What matters is what she wrote. I'm going to read it to you verbatim. Andrew heard more papers rustling, then Kate's voice, carefully neutral. Mr. Foster, I'm writing to inquire about the process for obtaining conservatorship of an elderly family member. My future mother-in-law is 67 years old and lives alone on a rural farm. While she seems physically healthy, I've noticed concerning signs of cognitive decline, confusion about dates, repeated stories, difficulty managing her finances. I'm worried about her welfare and believe she may need professional care soon. Could you advise me on the legal steps required to have her evaluated and, if necessary, placed under guardianship? I want to ensure she's properly cared for and that her assets are protected. Thank you for your time. The words hung in the air like poison. Andrew felt his legs go weak, and he sank into one of the porch rocking chairs. Andrew, are you still there? My mother doesn't have any cognitive decline, he said, his voice hollow. She runs the entire farm operations, manages all the finances, handles the farm stand, coordinates with buyers. She's sharper than I am. I know. That's why I'm calling. Andrew, there's more. How can there possibly be more? I found financial records showing that Melissa withdrew $75,000 from her trust fund 6 weeks ago. Her parents don't know. She has signatory authority and didn't need their permission. I tracked where that money went. Kate took a breath. It went to Blake Development Corporation. Do you know who that is? No. Thomas Blake is one of the most aggressive commercial developers in the Tri-County area. He's been buying up farmland for strip malls and housing developments. And according to the emails I found, he and Melissa have been in discussion about Willowbrook Farm since before you proposed to her. Andrew thought he might be sick. She wanted to sell the farm? Not just sell it. According to their correspondence, the plan was for Melissa to obtain legal control of your mother's assets through conservatorship, then sell the property to Blake. His offer was $6.5 million for the entire 3,500 acres, both your mother's original property and the inherited land. That's way below market value. Exactly. Your mother's property alone, with the inheritance, is worth at least $11 million, possibly more given the development potential. But Melissa didn't know about the inheritance, remember? She thought she was dealing with a 500-acre farm worth maybe $2 million. She'd negotiated a finder's fee of $1.5 million for delivering the property. Andrew's hands were shaking now. She was going to lock my mother away in some facility and steal her land. Yes, Kate's voice was gentle but firm. Andrew, I'm technically violating multiple ethical guidelines by telling you this, but I can't stand by and watch this happen. Your mother is completely mentally competent, and what Melissa is planning is elder abuse and fraud. I think you should go to the police. The police, Andrew repeated numbly. And Andrew, there's one more thing. This isn't the first time. What do you mean? I did some digging after I found those emails. In 2019, Melissa was engaged to a man named David Patterson. His mother was a widow with a small estate. The engagement ended abruptly, and Patterson got a restraining order against Melissa, claiming she'd been manipulating his mother. It was all settled privately, but the records are there if you know where to look. Andrew closed his eyes. The woman he'd almost married was a predator who targeted elderly widows, and she'd been planning to destroy his mother for over a year. Kate, I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet. We need to figure out what to do next. Can I come to the farm? I think we should talk to your mother and decide on a course of action. The sooner, the better. Yes, come now. And Kate, thank you. You might have just saved my mother's life. After he hung up, Andrew sat on the porch for a long moment, staring out at the fields his great-grandfather had cleared with his own hands, that his grandfather and father had worked, that his mother had tended for 40 years. Land that Melissa Bradford had planned to pave over for parking lots and chain stores. Behind him, through the kitchen window, he could hear his mother humming softly as she cooked. She thought the worst was over, that the humiliation at the church was the end of it. She had no idea that the real battle was just beginning. Andrew stood up and walked back into the house. Dorothy looked up from the pot she was stirring, her eyes concerned. Everything okay, honey? Mom, Andrew said gently, we need to talk, and you should probably sit down. Kate Morrison arrived 40 minutes later, her Honda Civic crunching on gravel. Sharp brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, dark hair and a practical ponytail. Andrew remembered her from law school as someone who never compromised her principles. Dorothy made coffee, and they sat around the kitchen table as Kate spread out documents. Mrs. Jones, your future daughter-in-law has been planning to have you declared mentally incompetent to control your assets. Dorothy's hand trembled, setting down her cup. But I'm not incompetent. I know, but once someone is declared incompetent through fraudulent medical evaluations, it's incredibly difficult to reverse. Kate looked at both of them. We need to act carefully. Before they could continue, Andrew's phone rang. Richard Bradford. He put it on speaker. Andrew, let's have a man-to-man conversation about this situation. I'm listening. Melissa's comment was unfortunate, but you're throwing away a future with one of the most influential families over one careless remark. What would it take to put this behind us? 10,000? 20? Andrew felt cold anger. My mother's dignity isn't for sale. Everything is negotiable. You can't be this impractical. I know about the private investigator, Daniel Foster, Blake Development, and the $75,000. I know about David Patterson. Silence. Then ice in Richard's voice. Making baseless accusations could be problematic for you. They're not baseless. I have documentation. The line went dead. Immediately, Melissa called. Kate gestured for Andrew to wait through several rings before answering. Andrew? Baby, please, we need to talk. Can I come to the farm? There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Explain what, Melissa? The fake medical evaluation? The $75,000 to Thomas Blake or David Patterson? Her sharp intake of breath was audible. That's not... Andrew, I was trying to help. Your mother's getting older. I have debt, so much debt. I was drowning and thought if we could liquidate some underutilized assets... My mother's farm isn't an asset to be liquidated. It's 3,000 acres that could provide housing. Your mother would have been comfortable in Meadowview at $6,000 a month, draining her savings in 15 years. And then what? She'd be 82. What does an 82-year-old need money for? The casual cruelty stunned him. Goodbye, Melissa. My father can make your life difficult, your contracts, your reputation. Andrew hung up. Kate nodded approvingly. She admitted debt, referenced the facility, even made threats. Now we build the case. Dorothy stood and retrieved a folder from her desk. 3 months ago, I updated my will and got a full medical evaluation with cognitive testing. Dr. Patricia Chen documented I'm in perfect mental health. Kate flipped through the papers. You prepared for this. My husband used to say, trust but verify. When Melissa started asking if I got confused or forgot things, I protected myself. Dorothy looked at Andrew. I kept hoping I was wrong about her. 3 days later, Kate returned with a briefcase full of evidence. Elizabeth had finally arrived from the hospital and sat beside Dorothy, her medical expertise invaluable. The medical evaluation is fake, Kate said, sliding a document across the table. Supposedly from Dr. Harrison Campbell at Riverside Medical Associates. Elizabeth scanned it. Wrong letterhead. And Campbell's a podiatrist, not a geriatric psychiatrist. This signature is forged. Kate pulled out emails. These are between Melissa and Thomas Blake, dating back 8 months, before Andrew proposed. Andrew read, Mr. Blake, I'm in a position to deliver approximately 3,500 acres of prime farmland. The owner is elderly and showing decline. I expect legal authority within 12 to 18 months. She planned this before we were engaged. Andrew felt sick. Kate showed bank statements. Melissa's trust fund was cut off last year after her parents discovered massive debt. She's been gambling online. Current debt, $160,000. Strong motive. She opened another folder. There's more. In 2019, Melissa was engaged to David Patterson. His mother, Helen, was a widow with a modest estate. Melissa befriended Helen, suggested cognitive decline, convinced David his mother needed help managing finances. What happened? Andrew asked. David's sister hired a PI. They found Melissa had gotten power of attorney and was selling Helen's house to a developer. David got a restraining order, but Richard Bradford paid Helen $250,000 to drop it and sign an NDA. Melissa disappeared for 6 months, then resurfaced here with a new identity. The pattern was clear. This wasn't Melissa's first attempt. Dorothy pulled out her own folder. My Uncle Thomas died 6 weeks ago, leaving me $8.5 million plus 2,500 acres, but his will stipulated a 90-day waiting period before public disclosure to see who valued me for myself versus my assets. Kate read the clause aloud, then looked up. When does the 90 days end? 2 weeks from now. When Melissa investigated 3 months ago, there was no public record. She thought I was just an old farmer on 500 acres worth maybe 2 or 3 million. Combined with the inheritance, Kate calculated, you're looking at roughly 11 million total. Melissa has no idea what she just walked away from. Elizabeth laughed without humor. She called Mom a peasant who smells like manure. Mom's worth more than the entire Bradford family. Kate's smile was sharp. Now we're talking attempted theft of $11 million. That changes everything. She looked at Andrew. We set a trap. Saturday morning. Behind books on the living room shelf, a small camera with audio recorder sat hidden. Pennsylvania's one-party consent law made recording legal with Dorothy's permission. Let her talk, Kate coached. Ask open questions, get details. Andrew called Melissa. She answered immediately, relief flooding her voice when he suggested they talk. Come to the farm, 2 o'clock. Melissa arrived in her white BMW, carefully dressed in a sundress, carrying a folder. Andrew led her to the kitchen where Dorothy sat with tea. Mrs. Jones, I'm so sorry, Melissa began, voice dripping contrition. It was inexcusable. Can you forgive me? Dorothy gestured to a chair. Let's talk. Melissa pulled out brochures. I've been thinking about your future. You're living here alone on this big property. I found Meadowview Senior Living. Beautiful place. 24-hour care, only $6,000 a month. Dorothy studied the brochure. That's expensive. The farm could cover it if we managed correctly. Actually, if we sold the property, you'd have plenty. I've gotten an offer. $6.5 million from Blake Development. Sold the farm? Dorothy's voice quavered convincingly. This is my home. I understand it's emotional, but I've noticed you having memory issues. Small things, forgetting appointments, repeating stories. I found Dr. Campbell who does cognitive assessments. If you need help, Andrew and I would get power of attorney, just a formality, and make sure you're properly cared for at Meadowview. How long could I afford it at $6,000 monthly? Melissa calculated, patronizing. At 6.5 million, even after taxes, you'd have 5 million. That's about 15 years. I'm 67. That makes me 82. Exactly. And honestly, most people your age don't live much past their early 80s. The casual cruelty hung in the air. How do you know Blake Development? Dorothy asked mildly. I've been in contact with Thomas Blake for months. He's very interested. 3,500 acres is perfect for development. Housing, retail, maybe schools. Dorothy blinked. 3,500 acres? I only have 500. Melissa froze, realizing her mistake. I meant, no, you said it specifically. How did you know about my uncle's property? From the doorway, Kate stepped into view. Because Andrew never mentioned it. The inheritance isn't public record yet. Melissa jumped. Who are you? Catherine Morrison, attorney. Everything you said was recorded. Melissa's eyes found the camera. She stood abruptly. This is entrapment. No, we documented your ongoing fraud. Kate's voice was calm. Dorothy stood, suddenly strong and clear-eyed. This worthless farm is worth $11 million, not 6.5. My uncle left me 8.5 million, combined with our property about 11 million total. Her smile was cold. So who's the peasant now? Melissa collapsed into the chair, composure shattered. You don't understand. The debt, the pressure, I'm drowning. So you plan to lock my mother away and steal her land? Andrew's voice was ice. She would have been fine, and she doesn't need all that money at her age. Kate pulled out more documents. We know everything, Melissa. The fake evaluation, forged power of attorney, the $75,000 to Blake. We know about David Patterson and Helen. At Patterson's name, Melissa flinched. That was different. A misunderstanding requiring $250,000 to settle? No, it's a pattern. You target men with elderly mothers, gain trust, then steal. Kate produced another folder. One more thing, your mother's financial records. Jennifer authorized me to review them after I informed her of potential fraud. Melissa went pale. My mother? Yes, emails between you two. Mom, I can't let Dad find out about the money. If this farm deal works, I'll pay everything back. Jennifer withdrew $120,000 from her account with Richard over 6 months. $50,000 went to you. The rest covered her own gambling debts. She promised she'd never tell, Melissa whispered. Your mother was counting on you to succeed, to solve both your problems, Kate said. She's been embezzling from your father. Elizabeth appeared in the doorway. Your own mother was your accomplice. Melissa looked around at their faces. Anger, strength, disgust, detachment. She was trapped. What do you want? She asked hollowly. Return the $75,000 to your parents within 48 hours, Andrew said. Cancel the Blake deal and leave town. I can't. I used $50,000 on credit cards. Not my problem. He'll sue me. Better than criminal charges. Elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, 5 to 10 years in federal prison. With Patterson, the DA argues pattern of predatory behavior. Your father can't save you, Dorothy said firmly. Once word gets out you tried to defraud one of the wealthiest women in 3 counties, he'll protect the Bradford name by disowning you. The truth crushed her. How long? 48 hours. Or we go to the police. Without a word, Melissa grabbed her things and left. They heard gravel spray as she drove away. Andrew sank into his chair, exhausted. Is it over? We'll know in 2 days, Kate said. Dorothy squeezed her son's hand. You did the right thing. Outside, sunset painted the fields gold. Inside, 4 people waited to see if justice would be served, voluntarily or not. Either way, Dorothy Jones wasn't going anywhere. Her home was safe, and Melissa Bradford was about to learn what it cost to underestimate a peasant. The 48 hours passed slowly. Andrew threw himself into farm work, helping his mother with repairs he'd been putting off for years. Elizabeth stayed through the weekend, her presence a comfort. Kate checked in daily, monitoring the situation. On Monday morning at 9:47 a.m., Andrew's phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Jones, this is Thomas Blake from Blake Development Corporation. Andrew's hand tightened on the phone. Mr. Blake. I received a very interesting call from Melissa Bradford this morning. She claims she misrepresented her authority regarding the Willowbrook property and that no sale will be occurring. Blake's voice was carefully neutral. I'd like to understand what's happening here. We had a signed letter of intent. Mr. Blake, did Melissa ever provide proof she had authority to sell the property? A pause. She said she was handling family affairs for the elderly owner. She provided what appeared to be power of attorney documents. Those documents were forged. My mother, Dorothy Jones, is the property owner. She never authorized any sale, never met with you, and is perfectly capable of managing her own affairs. I see. Blake's tone shifted to concern. Mr. Jones, I want you to know Blake Development conducts legitimate business. We had no knowledge of any fraud. Miss Bradford approached us with what appeared to be a legitimate opportunity. I believe you, and I appreciate you calling to verify. The $75,000 she paid as a deposit, should I return it to her or to your mother? Andrew smiled grimly. Return it to Mrs. Dorothy Jones at Willowbrook Farm. She's the actual property owner. I'll have the check issued today. And Mr. Jones, I'm very sorry for any distress this has caused your family. If Miss Bradford has committed fraud, you should contact the authorities. After hanging up, Andrew found his mother and Kate in the kitchen. Blake Development is returning the $75,000 to you, Mom. Dorothy nodded slowly. And Melissa? She called Blake like we demanded, but she didn't return the money to her parents. She just terminated the deal. Kate's expression hardened. She's not complying with the full terms. She's trying to minimize damage while keeping the money she's already spent. Andrew's phone rang again. Richard Bradford this time. Mr. Jones, my daughter has informed me she needs to borrow $75,000 immediately to cover a debt she claims she paid on our behalf. She's being very evasive about details. I'd like to know what the hell is going on. Andrew took a breath. Mr. Bradford, I think you should sit down and have a very long conversation with both your wife and your daughter. Ask them about Blake Development, about conservatorship fraud, and about the $120,000 that's missing from your joint account. What are you talking about? Ask them. And Mr. Bradford, you have until 5 p.m. today to make this right. After that, we're going to the police. He hung up before Richard could respond. Dorothy looked at her son with sad eyes. You're really going to do it? Press charges? Mom, what if she does this to someone else, another family, someone less prepared than you? Elizabeth nodded firmly. Andrew's right. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about protecting others. At 4:30 p.m., Andrew's phone rang one final time. Richard Bradford, his voice stripped of all pretension. Mr. Jones, I've spent the afternoon discovering things about my family I wish I didn't know. Jennifer has confessed to embezzling funds to cover gambling debts. Melissa has admitted to everything else. He sounded decades older. I'm prepared to write a check for $75,000 to be delivered to your mother immediately, and I'm filing for divorce from Jennifer. As for Melissa, I'm cutting her off completely. No more trust fund, no more bailouts. She's on her own. Mr. Bradford, I appreciate you taking responsibility, but it doesn't change what Melissa tried to do. I know, and I won't stand in your way if you choose to pursue criminal charges. She needs to face consequences. I failed her as a father by always fixing her problems. That ends now. Richard's voice cracked. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Your mother deserved better treatment from my family. After the call ended, Andrew looked at Kate. He's letting her go. No protection, no lawyers. She's vulnerable then, Kate said, which means this is our decision. Do we press charges or not? Andrew looked at his mother and sister. Dorothy's face was thoughtful, Elizabeth's determined. What if there are others? Elizabeth asked quietly. What if Helen Patterson wasn't the first? What if there are more victims we don't know about? Dorothy stood and walked to the window, looking out at her land. Finally, she turned back. My whole life I've believed in second chances. Your father taught me that. But I also believe in protecting the vulnerable. If we don't stop her, someone else will suffer. She looked at Andrew. Call the police. The next morning, Andrew, Dorothy, and Kate walked into Riverside Police Department. Detective James Porter, a veteran investigator in his 50s with sharp eyes and a methodical manner, listened to their story without interruption. When they finished, he sat back in his chair. Mrs. Jones, you're one of the most prepared victims I've ever met. Most people in elder fraud cases don't realize what's happening until it's too late. I had a good teacher, Dorothy said simply. My late husband. Porter reviewed their evidence, the recordings, emails, fake documents, financial records, the Patterson case. This is substantial. We'll need to verify some of this, but if it checks out, we're looking at multiple felony counts. He looked at Melissa's photo from their file. Elder abuse, fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit theft. Given the amounts involved and the pattern of behavior, the DA will want to prosecute aggressively. How long before she's arrested? Andrew asked. 48 to 72 hours if everything verifies. We'll need Mrs. Jones to give a formal statement, and we'll want to interview Mr. Patterson as well. 2 days later, Detective Porter called. We picked up Melissa Bradford this morning. She's being held on $100,000 bond. Will her father post it? Her father declined, said, and I quote, "She needs to face the consequences of her choices. She's still in custody." The news spread through Riverside like wildfire. A former Riverside High School student had recorded video of the wedding disaster on her phone. Melissa's cruel words to Dorothy captured in grainy but clear footage. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed over 1 million times on social media. Local woman arrested in elaborate elder fraud scheme, read the headline in the Riverside Gazette. The article detailed Melissa's attempt to defraud a local farming family without initially naming Dorothy. But in a town of 15,000, anonymity was impossible. Andrew's phone exploded with messages. Old friends, colleagues, even people he hadn't spoken to in years. Most were supportive, a few were skeptical, but it was the message from David Patterson that hit hardest. "Thank you for doing what I didn't have the courage to do. Maybe now she'll finally stop." 3 months later, Andrew sat in Riverside County Courthouse beside his mother and sister. Kate sat behind them in the gallery, along with David Patterson and his mother Helen, who'd driven in from Ohio to support the prosecution. Melissa had been indicted on 7 counts: attempted elder abuse, fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit theft, wire fraud, and 2 counts of making false statements to financial institutions. Her public defender had advised her to accept a plea deal, 3 to 5 years in exchange for guilty pleas on 5 counts. Melissa had refused. "I want a trial," she'd told the judge at arraignment. "I'm innocent." Now, as the jury filed in, Andrew studied them. 8 women, 4 men. Most middle-aged or older. Several looked like they could be farmers or small business owners, people who understood the value of hard work and honest living. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Assistant District Attorney Patricia Williams presented the evidence piece by piece: the fake medical evaluation, the forged power of attorney, the emails with Blake Development, the financial records showing Melissa's crushing debt, and finally, testimony from David Patterson about the 2019 incident with his mother. "Miss Bradford has a pattern," Williams told the jury in her opening statement. "She targets men with elderly mothers. She gains their trust, inserts herself into the family, then manipulates the situation to gain control of the elders' assets. In 2019, she attempted this with Helen Patterson. In 2025, she attempted it with Dorothy Jones. The only question is, how many times in between did she succeed?" When Dorothy took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She wore a simple navy dress and spoke in her clear, steady voice. "Mrs. Jones," Williams asked gently, "please tell the jury about your relationship with the defendant." "Melissa was my son's fiancée. I tried to welcome her into our family. I ignored the small insults, comments about my clothes, my work, my home, because I wanted Andrew to be happy." Dorothy's voice never wavered. "Then I learned she planned to have me declared mentally incompetent and imprisoned in a nursing facility so she could steal my land and sell it for profit." "How did that make you feel?" "Betrayed. But mostly I felt sorry for her. She had so many advantages: education, family support, opportunities, and she chose to use all of that to hurt vulnerable people." Melissa's attorney tried to shake Dorothy's testimony during cross-examination, suggesting she'd misunderstood Melissa's intentions. Dorothy remained calm and unflappable. "Sir, I'm a 67-year-old woman who has run a working farm for 30 years. I manage finances, equipment, employees, crop rotation, market sales, and everything else required to maintain a successful agricultural business. Do I seem mentally incompetent to you?" Even the defense attorney had to concede she did not. When Melissa took the stand in her own defense, desperation showed through her carefully maintained composure. "I made mistakes," she admitted, "but I was trying to help. Mrs. Jones is getting older. I thought professional care would be better for her. I thought selling unused land would provide for her future. Miss Bradford, Williams said during cross-examination, you told Mrs. Jones that most people her age don't live past their early 80s. You plan to deplete her assets within 15 years. What did you intend to happen after that? I hadn't thought that far ahead. You hadn't thought about what would happen to Mrs. Jones when the money ran out? Or you didn't care? That's not fair. You told Thomas Blake in an email that the old woman won't be a problem. What did you mean? I meant she wouldn't contest the sale. Because you planned to have her declared incompetent and locked away in a facility where she couldn't contest anything. Isn't that right? I wanted her to be safe. You wanted her to be silenced. Williams pulled out financial records. You have $160,000 in personal debt, gambling losses, credit cards, personal loans. The finder's fee from Blake Development would have been $1.5 million. This wasn't about Mrs. Jones's safety. It was about your money problems. Melissa's face crumpled. I was desperate. I needed help and no one would help me. So you decided to destroy an innocent woman's life for profit. The defense attorney objected, but the damage was done. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. When they returned, the four women stood. On the charge of attempted elder abuse, guilty. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. Guilty on 5 of 7 counts. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Melissa dissolved into sobs. Andrew felt no triumph, just a profound sadness. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge looked at Melissa with genuine disappointment. Miss Bradford, you are educated, intelligent, and came from privilege. You had every opportunity to succeed honestly. Instead, you chose to prey on vulnerable people, twice that we know of, possibly more. I'm sentencing you to 5 years in state prison with possibility of parole after 3 years, plus mandatory restitution of all funds obtained through fraud, and 3 years of supervised probation following release. Melissa was led away in handcuffs, still crying. Jennifer Bradford, sitting alone in the gallery. Richard had indeed filed for divorce, watched with dead eyes. Andrew took his mother's hand as they left the courthouse. How do you feel? Sad, Dorothy said honestly. Sad that it came to this, but I hope she gets the help she needs in prison. Real help this time. 6 months after the trial, winter had settled over Willowbrook Farm. Andrew stood in the kitchen helping his mother prepare Christmas dinner while Elizabeth set the table. The house smelled of roasting turkey and Dorothy's famous apple pie. Kate Morrison knocked and entered without waiting, bringing cold air and a bottle of wine. She'd become family over the past year, no longer just their attorney, but a true friend. News from the parole board, Kate said, hanging up her coat. Melissa's been a model prisoner, attending therapy, working in the prison library. She'll likely get early parole after 18 months served. Good, Dorothy said, surprising them all. I genuinely hope she's changed. She sent a letter through her therapist, asked if I'd read it to you. Kate pulled out an envelope. It's been screened, nothing threatening. Dorothy nodded, and Kate read, Mrs. Jones, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. What I tried to do to you was inexcusable. Prison has given me time to understand how sick I was, not physically, but in my thinking and values. I targeted you because I saw wealth instead of a person. I'm in treatment for gambling addiction and personality disorders I didn't even know I had. I don't expect you to care about my rehabilitation, but I want you to know I'm grateful you stopped me before I actually succeeded in hurting you or someone else. I hope someday I can become someone who contributes to society instead of taking from it. Melissa Bradford. Silence filled the kitchen. Then Dorothy said quietly, I hope she means that. I really do. The conversation shifted to happier topics. Dorothy had established the Hartwell Jones Foundation for Elder Protection, funded by a portion of her inheritance. Elizabeth served as medical director, screening potential fraud cases. Kate provided pro bono legal services. In 6 months, they'd helped 11 families protect themselves from similar schemes. We got a call from a woman in Pittsburgh, Elizabeth reported. Her son's new girlfriend was asking suspiciously detailed questions about her health and assets. We helped her document everything, tighten her will, get a medical evaluation. Turned out the girlfriend had a record of financial exploitation. We probably saved that woman's life savings. That's exactly what we wanted, Dorothy said. Something good coming from something terrible. Andrew had been quieter than usual during the conversation. Kate noticed. "You okay?" "Yeah, just thinking," he smiled. "For the first time in a year, I feel like I can breathe, like we're finally past it." "You are," Kate assured him. "And Andrew? You might want to think about getting back out there. Dating, I mean. You're allowed to move on." Andrew laughed. "Maybe, eventually. Right now I'm just happy being here with people I love." As they sat down to dinner, just the four of them, a small family built on loyalty and trust, Andrew looked around the table, his mother, strong and resilient, his sister, compassionate and fierce, Kate, principled and brilliant. This was his real family. This was what mattered. Outside, snow fell gently on Willowbrook Farm, blanketing the fields in white. The land would rest through winter and bloom again in spring. Just like his family, wounded but healing, tested but stronger. 2 years later, the Hartwell Jones Foundation's annual gala filled the Riverside Community Center with 200 guests. Dorothy stood at the podium in an elegant emerald dress. She'd finally allowed Elizabeth to take her shopping, and addressed the crowd. "2 years ago, I almost lost everything to someone I trusted. Today, we've helped protect over 70 families from similar fraud. We've trained law enforcement, educated seniors, and provided free legal services to vulnerable populations." She smiled. "Thank you all for being part of this mission." Applause filled the room. Andrew watched his mother with pride. She'd transformed her pain into purpose. "You look happy." Andrew turned to find a woman he vaguely recognized. Mid-30s, dark hair, warm brown eyes. "I'm sorry, have we met?" "Sarah Mitchell. I'm the new environmental engineer at Riverside Tech. We met briefly at the county planning meeting last month." She smiled. "I didn't realize you were involved with this foundation. It's incredible work." "It's personal for my family." They talked through dinner about sustainable agriculture, water conservation, and rural development. Sarah was passionate about environmental protection while supporting working farms, a rare combination. "You know," Sarah said as dessert arrived, "I've been looking for local farms that might be interested in partnering on a watershed protection project. Would Willowbrook Farm be open to that?" "Absolutely. Why don't you come by next week? I'll show you around, introduce you to my mother." "I'd like that." From across the room, Dorothy caught Andrew's eye and smiled knowingly. Kate, sitting beside her, whispered something that made Dorothy laugh. Andrew shook his head but couldn't help grinning. Maybe they were right. Maybe it was time to start thinking about the future instead of dwelling on the past. "So," Sarah said, "tell me about Willowbrook Farm. How long has it been in your family?" 4 generations. 5 if things work out." Andrew heard himself say it, and felt something shift inside him. Hope, possibility, the sense that good things could still happen. Sarah's eyes lit up. "I'd love to hear more." As the evening wound down, Andrew stood on the community center steps with Sarah, watching stars emerge over Riverside. The air was crisp with autumn promise. "Thank you for tonight," Sarah said. "I'm looking forward to seeing the farm." "Me too." She walked to her car, and Andrew watched her go, feeling something he hadn't felt in 2 years, genuine interest in someone. Not rushed, not forced, just natural. Behind him, Dorothy appeared with her coat. "She seems nice." "Mom, don't start." "I'm not starting anything. I'm just observing." Dorothy linked her arm through his. "But Andrew, when you meet someone who asks about the farm before anything else, someone who sees it as something precious to be protected, not something valuable to be sold, that's worth paying attention to." Andrew looked at his mother, this remarkable woman who'd taught him everything important about strength, dignity, and values. "You're pretty wise, you know that?" "I've had a good teacher," she said, echoing her words from the trial. Life. They stood together looking out at the town that had rallied around them, the community that had supported them through crisis. Somewhere out there, Melissa was starting over, hopefully better than before. Richard and Jennifer Bradford were divorced and dealing with their own consequences. David and Helen Patterson had found peace. And here, Andrew and Dorothy Jones stood on land that had been in their family for generations, would remain for generations more, teaching the same lessons it had always taught, that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, that dignity can't be bought or sold, and that family, Real family, the kind built on loyalty and love, is worth more than any fortune. Ready to go home? Dorothy asked. Yeah, Andrew said, smiling. Let's go home. And under a sky full of stars, they drove back to Willowbrook Farm, where the fields waited patiently for spring, where the old farmhouse stood strong and welcoming, where the next chapter of their story was just beginning.